the Holy Roman Empire, power, faith, and the eternal struggle. Segment 1. The birth of the Empire. In the heart of Europe, the foundations of the Holy Roman Empire were laid upon ancient traditions and Christian faith. Following the collapse of Rome, a vacuum of authority left kingdoms divided, until the coronation of Charlemagne by Pope Leo III in 800 AD. This event was more than symbolic. It forged a union of sword and cross, binding kingship to the spiritual guardianship of the Church. The empire was envisioned as a continuation of Rome, a realm where divine sanction legitimized earthly rule, setting the stage for centuries of struggle between emperor and pope. Charlemagne's empire stretched from the Pyrenees to the Danube, a vast dominion embodying the dream of Christian unity under one ruler. Yet this dream carried a paradox. Was the emperor the protector of the Church, or its subordinate? By crowning him, the Pope established a precedent that imperial authority flowed not only from conquest but from papal blessing. This delicate balance of power would define medieval Europe, fueling an enduring struggle. The question lingered across centuries. Who held supremacy over Christendom? The sword of the emperor or the keys of St. Peter? Segment 2. Charlemagne and the Pope. The alliance between Charlemagne and Pope Leo III was mutually beneficial, yet fraught with tension. For the Pope, the emperor's armies offered protection against enemies in Rome. For Charlemagne, papal endorsement elevated his rule beyond worldly power, linking him to a divine mission. The ceremony in St. Peter's Basilica fused politics and spirituality into one momentous act. Yet beneath this alliance lay a silent question of dominance. Did the Pope crown the emperor as a superior, or simply recognize his authority as God's chosen king? The ambiguity would ignite disputes in centuries to come. Medieval chroniclers describe Charlemagne as both a warrior and a saintly ruler. His court became a beacon of learning, faith, and cultural revival, known as the Carolingian Renaissance. Yet the seeds of conflict were sown. If the Pope could crown an emperor, could he also unmake him? This theological and political riddle troubled successors for generations. While Charlemagne commanded loyalty in his lifetime, later emperors would find their authority contested, their legitimacy questioned, and their crowns dependent on Rome's favor. The uneasy bond of church and empire would soon crack under the weight of ambition. Segment 3. The sacred crown of authority. The imperial crown was more than a symbol. It was believed to hold divine legitimacy. When placed upon the emperor's head, it represented not only worldly power, but God's chosen ruler on earth. Yet, the Church claimed authority in granting this sacred object. Emperors viewed it as their birthright, a continuation of Roman glory, while popes saw it as a gift they could bestow or revoke. This tension made the crown a contested relic, a prize fought over in ceremony and battlefield alike, embodying the deep entanglement of religion and politics in medieval Europe. Ceremonial coronations were staged with grandeur, filled with incense, chants, and sacred oaths. But behind the splendor lurked rivalry. Some emperors sought independence from papal control, asserting their rule as God-given, without papal approval. Others humbly submitted, knowing rebellion could bring excommunication. To lose the crown was to lose legitimacy. To challenge the Pope was to risk rebellion at home. The crown thus became a double-edged sword, granting authority, yet binding emperors to Rome. Over centuries, it transformed into a battlefield of symbols, where divine right collided with human ambition. Segment 4. The Investiture Controversy. By the 11th century, tension erupted into open conflict, the Investiture Controversy. At its core was a question: Who had the right to appoint bishops and abbots, the Pope or the Emperor? These appointments carried immense wealth and power, making them central to medieval politics. Popes insisted that only the Church could invest clergy with authority, while emperors argued that their rule required control over such appointments. The controversy revealed the blurred line between sacred duty and political influence, igniting one of the greatest struggles of the Middle Ages. Pope Gregory VII and Emperor Henry IV became the leading figures of this clash. Gregory sought reform, purging corruption and asserting papal supremacy. Henry resisted, determined to preserve imperial influence. Letters flew between Rome and the Empire, each accusing the other of overreach. The dispute escalated into excommunication, rebellion, and humiliation. The Investiture Controversy was more than a quarrel over appointments. It was a battle over the soul of Christendom, forcing rulers and clergy to choose between loyalty to the Pope or obedience to the Emperor. Segment 5. Henry IV at Canossa. In the winter of 1077, Emperor Henry IV made a fateful journey to Canossa. After being excommunicated by Pope Gregory VII, Henry's rule crumbled as nobles rebelled against him. To save his crown, he crossed the snowy Alps to beg forgiveness. For 3 days, he stood barefoot in the cold before the gates of Canossa Castle, pleading for absolution. The Pope, reluctant yet pressured, lifted the ban. This dramatic act symbolized papal dominance and imperial weakness, a moment etched in medieval memory as the height of papal power. Yet Canossa was not the end, but the beginning of deeper struggles. Though Henry was forgiven, he later marched into Rome, deposing Gregory and installing his own pope. The humiliation of Canossa became a bitter wound, one that emperors vowed never to repeat. It embodied the precarious balance of submission and defiance, faith and power. For centuries, Canossa symbolized the contest between spiritual authority and secular mitre, reminder that even emperors could kneel before the Pope, yet only temporarily. The rivalry was far from over. Segment 6. The rise of Frederick Barbarossa. Frederick I, known as Barbarossa, emerged in the 12th century as one of the empire's most iconic rulers. Tall, commanding, and ambitious, he sought to restore imperial dignity and unite the fragmented lands under a single crown. Barbarossa envisioned the emperor as the true heir of Rome, not a vassal of the Pope. His reign became a test of imperial independence, marked by campaigns in Italy and alliances across Europe. Yet his dream of dominance collided with papal resistance, fueling renewed struggles between throne and altar. Barbarossa's charisma inspired loyalty among princes and knights, but his ambitions unsettled the papacy. Determined to curb his influence, successive popes opposed him, sparking years of conflict in Lombardy. Though he achieved victories on the battlefield, the Church's spiritual authority proved harder to overcome. At the Battle of Legnano in 1176, Barbarossa's forces suffered a crushing defeat by the Lombard League, backed by papal support. Forced to compromise, he recognized papal authority in Italy, a reminder that even the mightiest emperors could not bend Christendom entirely to their will. Segment 7. The battle with papal supremacy. The 12th and 13th centuries witnessed repeated clashes between emperors and popes over supremacy. The Church claimed the power to crown and depose emperors, asserting that papal authority was universal. Emperors, however, argued that their rule came directly from God, not papal sanction. This ideological duel turned Europe into a chessboard of shifting alliances, with kings, nobles, and cities drawn into the conflict. Every coronation became a contested event, every excommunication a political weapon. The rivalry was no longer just theological, it was a struggle for the very soul of Europe. Popes wielded spiritual tools that no emperor could match. The threat of excommunication and interdict could paralyze kingdoms, stripping rulers of legitimacy. Yet emperors wielded armies, besieging Rome and installing rival popes. The back and forth between throne and altar destabilized the empire, creating civil wars and weakening its unity. These contests revealed the paradox of medieval power. The Pope commanded hearts and consciences, while the Emperor commanded swords. Neither side achieved total supremacy, but their battles reshaped the structure of European governance for centuries to come. Segment 8. Excommunication and rebellion. Excommunication became the Pope's most powerful weapon against emperors. When rulers defied papal authority, they were cut off from the sacraments and denounced as enemies of the Church. This not only weakened their spiritual standing, but emboldened rebellious nobles, who claimed freedom from loyalty to a condemned king. The empire, already fractured by local rivalries, often erupted into rebellion at the Pope's command. The emperor's crown could be shaken not by foreign invaders, but by papal decrees delivered from Rome. For emperors, resisting excommunication was both dangerous and necessary. Some defied the ban, rallying loyal supporters to their cause. Others sought compromise, humbling themselves before the Church to preserve their crowns. Yet, each conflict eroded imperial authority, making emperors appear vulnerable. Civil wars, betrayals, and rival claimants plagued the empire whenever papal intervention struck. Excommunication revealed the Church's ability to turn faith into a weapon, binding conscience and politics together. For the people of the empire, loyalty was torn between devotion to Rome and allegiance to their ruler. Segment 9. The struggle for Lombardy. Northern Italy became the crucible of imperial and papal rivalry. Rich in trade and culture, Lombardy was essential for control of Europe. Emperors sought to impose authority over its cities, while popes backed local resistance, forging the Lombard League. The battles fought here were not just for territory, but for legitimacy. Imperial campaigns through Italy symbolized the emperor's quest for dominance. Yet the city's defiance embodied the growing strength of local freedoms and papal influence. The struggle for Lombardy was a contest where empire met independence. The decisive clash came at the Battle of Legnano in 1176, where Frederick Barbarossa's army faced the united Lombard cities. Against expectations, the League triumphed, striking a blow to imperial power. The Peace of Constance that followed forced the emperor to recognize the autonomy of the Lombard communes, while still claiming overlordship. This uneasy compromise highlighted the empire's fragile structure, too vast to dominate fully, too fragmented to unite. Lombardy became a symbol of the limits of imperial power, proving that cities and popes together could resist even the greatest emperors. Segment 10. The Empire in decline. As centuries passed, the Holy Roman Empire became less a unified state and more a patchwork of kingdoms, duchies, and free cities. The emperor's authority weakened as local princes grew more independent, ruling their territories with little regard for imperial decrees. The Church, too, faced internal crises, from corruption to schisms, but its influence remained strong. The empire, once envisioned as the heir of Rome, appeared increasingly fractured, unable to assert dominance. The balance of power tilted toward decentralization, setting the stage for future transformations. Despite decline, the empire remained a stage for grand ceremonies and symbolic power. Emperors continued to be crowned, processions filled cathedrals, and oaths were sworn in God's name. Yet the grandeur masked weakness. The emperor's crown was often contested, his influence limited to negotiation and compromise. The dream of a Christian empire uniting Europe under one ruler faded into myth. Still, the empire endured, a relic of both ambition and tradition. Its decline was gradual, yet its presence lingered across the centuries as both memory and reality. Segment 11. The Golden Bull of 1356. In 1356, Emperor Charles IV issued the Golden Bull, a decree that reshaped the empire's structure. It established the system of 7 prince-electors who would choose each new emperor. This codified the empire's fragmented nature, formalizing the power of regional rulers over imperial unity. The Golden Bull symbolized compromise. Emperors gained legitimacy through election, but their dependence on powerful princes grew stronger. The empire became less centralized, its strength dispersed among the nobility. The Golden Bull ensured stability in succession but weakened imperial authority. By binding the crown to the will of electors, it entrenched the empire's decentralization, while Charles IV presented it as a triumph of order. It was also an admission that imperial supremacy could not override the independence of its princes. The empire transformed into a federation of states under a symbolic head, foreshadowing the complex political landscape of Germany for centuries. The Golden Bull marked both continuity and decline, solidifying the empire's fragile balance. Segment 12. Emperor versus Pope, a fragile balance. By the late Middle Ages, the empire and papacy had fought for centuries, but neither side had achieved final victory. Instead, a fragile balance emerged. Emperors accepted the Pope's spiritual supremacy, while popes recognized the emperor's role as protector of Christendom. This uneasy truce was often broken, yet it reflected a mutual dependence neither could escape. The empire embodied temporal power, while the church represented eternal authority. Together, they formed the dual pillars of medieval Europe. Despite outward cooperation, tension never disappeared. Rivalries flared whenever emperors asserted independence or popes sought dominance. Councils and treaties attempted to define boundaries, but ambiguity persisted. The struggle between throne and altar became a permanent feature of European politics, shaping law, governance, and faith. This fragile balance laid the groundwork for later upheavals, including the Reformation, when the bond between empire and church would finally fracture. For now, the two powers stood side by side, locked in a wary coexistence. Segment 13. The Reformation and Imperial Crisis. The 16th century shattered the delicate balance between empire and church. Martin Luther's Reformation ignited religious turmoil, challenging papal authority and dividing the empire along confessional lines. Emperors like Charles V struggled to defend Catholic unity, facing both Protestant princes and Ottoman invaders. The emperor's role as defender of Christendom collapsed under the weight of religious wars. The empire, already fragile, fractured further, its authority undermined by faith itself. The Diet of Worms, the Peace of Augsburg, and endless battles revealed the empire's limits. Charles V, though powerful, could not impose unity. Princes asserted their right to choose religion for their lands, weakening imperial centralization even more. The Reformation transformed the struggle between Pope and Emperor into a broader crisis of faith and sovereignty. The empire became a battlefield of ideas as well as armies, its unity crumbling under the pressure of reform. Segment 14. The 30 Years' War. The 17th century brought the empire's greatest catastrophe, the 30 Years' War. What began as a religious conflict exploded into a struggle for political dominance, involving nearly every power in Europe. Cities burned, armies ravaged the land, and millions perished. The war revealed the empire's impotence. The emperor was unable to control his princes, who sought their own alliances and ambitions. The conflict devastated Central Europe, leaving scars that would last generations. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 ended the war, but it sealed the empire's decline. Imperial authority was reduced to little more than ceremony, as princes gained near sovereign control. The Pope's influence, too, waned, as states asserted independence from Rome. The dream of a united Christian empire was gone. What remained was a patchwork of states under the hollow title of emperor, a relic of an older age. The 30 Years' War marked the end of the empire's strength and the beginning of Europe's modern state system. Segment 15. The legacy of the Holy Roman Empire. Though weakened, the Holy Roman Empire endured until 1806, when Napoleon dissolved it. Its thousand-year history left a profound legacy. The struggle between emperor and pope shaped the development of law, governance, and the separation of powers in Europe. The empire's decentralization laid the groundwork for the modern German states, while its ideals of Christian unity influenced European identity for centuries. Its memory lived on, even as its crown and symbols faded into history. The empire's story is one of ambition and compromise, faith and politics, power and humility. From Charlemagne's coronation to the Treaty of Westphalia, it embodied the eternal question of who should rule, king or priest, sword or cross. The Holy Roman Empire may have fallen, but its struggles defined Europe's path, shaping the nations and ideas we know today. Its legacy endures not as a failed empire, but as a crucible where faith and power forged the destiny of a continent.